These are all of my summer crochet projects. Today I'm going to be sharing all of my creations from this past summer that were crocheted and are made to be worn in the summertime. We're talking granny square shorts, a cotton open weave tank top, a polo shirt that looks like it just walked off the runways at Fashion Week. The only catch is I didn't use any patterns. Instead, I'll take you on a journey through my creative process, from inspiration to material choice, why I did what I did, and any learnings so that you can apply them to your future creations and maybe get a little bit inspired. Let's kick it off with one of my summer staples, a pair of crochet shorts that are anything but basic rectangles. The idea and inspiration for these shorts came from me trying to make granny square shorts last year, having the project go terribly awry. These need to be taken apart and repurposed. I recycled all of the granny square actual squares that had been in the original pair of shorts and remade them. I've been really favoring knee-length shorts lately, so I wanted them to have kind of like an easy board short vibe with straight sides and a more relaxed fit. And yes, they do have pockets. These were actually quite a hodgepodge of materials because I had made a lot of the original granny squares out of polyester multicolored yarn that had come with my very first set of crochet hooks. The main squares are made out of a size 4 hook, although the joining bits on the sides are a little bit bigger. It's at least like a 5.5, I think, for the red merino, which I use to join these all together. Now, I did start out joining them together in roughly a rectangular shape, but I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here in just a minute. The stitch pattern on this was a pretty traditional granny square. I did have a nice scallop border at the bottom, and then I use a lot of double crochets to bring this in at the waist. We need to talk about shaping. Pants and shorts are not cut out as flat rectangles because our bodies aren't flat rectangles, and your garment needs to make room for that. Pants and trousers all have this little extra bit that comes down in under the crotch, and this looks like the front because the back is usually a little bit longer because it has to come in under your rear and connect to the front. It's not straight up and down. And then this curve here accommodates your stomach, which is important. And then also on the back piece, it tends to be a little bit steeper of a curve because that's where your derriere goes. So rather than just stitching these together as rectangles and hating my life, I laid my rectangles on top of my favorite pair of shorts and basically created this extension piece right here, which looks very similar to what we were just looking at. And then we sew it all together. It gives some very nice shaping at the bottom here. Another important lesson from these shorts is I needed to decrease massively from kind of the width that was here to the waistband. I could have been a little bit smarter and probably started with some smaller granny squares, but we already were where we were. And in that case, I needed to do a lot of decreases. Now, unfortunately, when you decrease using crochet, you end up with a lot of holes. And when you're trying to have a strong waistband, that can kind of encourage it to stretch out a little bit more. So I did just cheat and sew in a piece of elastic in here using a sewing machine. And I also used a sewing machine to just sew on the pockets because yarn actually takes sewing machine stitches really well, so you can just kind of sew through, and that was really quick and easy. These were colorful, breezy. I could have lined them, but I ended up just wearing like boy shorts underneath all the time, and I found them to be plenty of coverage, but 10 out of 10, probably one of my favorite things I've crocheted in a really long time. Next up, I've got an honorable mention in the summer category since these were technically finished in May. They made their street style debut in August at Copenhagen Fashion Week, and with the material choice, I think they're something that fits very much with our continuation of summer project pieces. These were originally designed as part of a Met Gala inspired look, paying homage to Karl Lagerfeld, and while they may not be quintessential summer attire, the construction on these is really interesting, so I wanted to make sure I got a chance to share that with you. The hood was inspired by some fabulous beanies that were embellished with plastic flowers in Chanel couture runway shows, and in my case I used silk organza flowers that I handmade and attached to this crocheted piece. And then the gloves, of course, I think the fingerless element is fairly self-explanatory, but I wanted to create an illusion of them looking like they were kind of floating and not attached anywhere, which they are not. Both pieces were actually crafted from this fabulous cotton from a tiny producer called Juniper Moon Farm, and it is some of the softest cotton I have ever felt. The skeins actually start out in this fabulous dark red and then ombre into this just radiant blue at the bottom, very much like a sunrise in the morning, and I absolutely adored that. Fundamentally, both pieces are just granny squares stitched together with some border stitches to allow for some joining and some shaping. And then both of the gloves actually have some boning that's woven in here to give that structure and allow for the illusion of the floating sleeve. And fun fact for anyone who's looking for a really easy fingerless glove pattern, you can just take 2 granny squares, sew them together, but leave a hole for your thumb, do a few double crochets around, and there you go. Super easy, fabulous fingerless gloves pattern. Cruising through our summer crochet projects, I wanted to take a moment to mention this amazing sweater that was made out of macrame cording. This piece has affectionately earned the nickname in my wardrobe as my weighted blanket sweater because of the weight, but it's a really fabulous piece. But if you want to know more about it, there's another video. So when we talk about runway ready fashion, this top slash you can turn around its little jacket is definitely it. The inspiration from this piece came in an experimental design class that I did, and I wanted to venture into the use of kind of traditional techniques such as crochet in abstract shapes to kind of push the boundaries of what we think of when we look at conventional fashion. I opted for a spaghetti yarn, which, if you're familiar with it, is this amazing yarn that is actually made from recycled materials. And this green yarn happened to have a decent amount of stretch to it. Due to the recycled nature of spaghetti yarn, it's a bit unpredictable when it comes to tension, but that's half the fun, right? On this project, I used a size 6 hook, which created a pretty stretchy, tight fabric. A 6 would probably be a little bit small for the weight of this particular yarn. And now for my favorite extra nerdy part of this. If you increase your stitch at an increasing rate, you end up getting a circle. If you increase your stitch at a fixed rate, you end up getting a hyperbolic curve, which means it's increasing exponentially in both directions at the same time, or in very basic terms, you get a ruffle. So I was using hyperbolic crochet on this particular project, and I ended up actually increasing too quickly in the bust area and creating this kind of like faux booby shape, which I'm not mad about, but it just wasn't really what I was going for. So I ended up unraveling it, doing it again. And isn't that one of the reasons we love crochet? Because we can kind of experiment, play around, try, see what works, see what doesn't. And despite the weight, the shape is actually really great for just if you want something fabulous to add to an outfit. The stretchy cotton is actually really cool to the touch. So definitely a good piece for the summer if you don't mind standing out. If you follow me on social media, you may know that I refer to this as my pattern test fail tank top. And you may be wondering, why the fail? That looks pretty cute. So it all began with this vintage crochet projects book that I had been carrying around. The real spark ignited when we were in a local yarn shop, and I found all of this fabulous cotton that I wanted to make one of these sweaters that, yes, is meant for children. The right thing to do was to first test out the pattern and see how difficult it would be to scale up that particular pattern to an adult size. I started following the pattern in just this cream colorway, and before I knew it, I had a nice rectangular large swatch, and I was like, what can I turn this into? First, it just became this tank top with some gorgeous holes in it so that you could see through, and it was really lovely. Now in the pattern book, they have you weave through different colored crocheted let's say tubes, if you will. Not quite a tube, but like pieces in different colors. And it just didn't look right to me. So I decided I would try something different because I had all of this colorful yarn. I knitted a little ribbed finish here and decided I would actually make it reversible. I continued that ribbing with the other colors and then crocheted with the same pattern, just at a slightly different width, so that when the colorful side is out, you see the cream through these holes. And then when the cream side is out, you see these gorgeous colors through. I do love a cotton crochet tank top in the summer, and I know this has already been worn a ton and it's gonna continue to. So definitely made the most of this project and learned a lot. Finally, the crochet polo. I would say this is the piece de resistance of all of my crochet projects this summer. Crochet button-ups and crochet polos have been all over runways and high street, and there's a really noticeable influence on this trend from the American sportswear trend of Bodie. They're actually made from upcycled textiles, so rather than being something that was crocheted for this look, it was actually cut and sewn from a vintage Afghan of some kind. I decided to create a similar look, crocheting it from scratch without a pattern. Opted for more of a pullover design versus a button-up shirting, just because something in my head, even though this is completely sheer pretty much, feels like I need to be wearing more of a shirt under a button-up versus a polo. I wanted something that had a really nice open weave to it, since this looks like it's ready for a vacation, but I didn't want a traditional granny square. So instead I found this fabulous stitch that's called a drunken granny, which I love because it still provides that great open weave without being as traditional of a granny shape. I crocheted the pieces like they were flat pattern pieces. I started with the back, then did the front, and then did the sleeves in a dolman shape. However, a slight hiccup did arise when I went to join everything together with the collar, because I had kind of overestimated what that diameter needed to be and ended up with a neckline that was actually too wide. And having found out on the granny square shorts that a decrease in crochet still creates a lot of space and not tons of structure, I actually decided to do the decrease around the neck using a size 2 knitting needle to actually get everything really nice and tight. And that ended up making that really delightful collar stand that I needed, that actually allows the top of this collar to curve so nicely and pretty much stand up on its own. For both the collar and this is what we call a collar placket, I ended up using a single crochet, even though it ended up looking a lot like a double crochet. And the reason why I did that is because I was going back and forth with the stitch, but you actually have a lot more control over the shape, and it creates a slightly tighter weave. So again, there was more structure to that collar and that placket as I was doing it. And despite a little bit of trial and error, I could not be more delighted with this piece. It felt really full circle to start out the summer with a pair of what would be traditionally cut and sewn shorts and end with what would be a traditionally cut and sewn shirt, and have both be made entirely out of crochet. I would love to hear from you. Which was your favorite piece? And maybe you even have a summer crochet project to share. Let's keep this chat going in the comments below. And if you enjoyed all of these colorful, creative crochet projects, that's a mouthful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that little bell to remind you every time a new video comes out. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you were inspired, and until next time, happy crocheting.